Sometimes they come back. Part 2. This is that Hot Rod Deluxe 4 that I recapped and upgraded all the 5-watt components in a couple weeks back. And the screen grid resistors, and redid the solder joints on the output tube sockets. You can see that video. I'll put a link in the description below and flash something up top on the screen to watch after this. But after the owner got it back, he sent me a video of it making a horrible noise, which I'll insert here. And I said, I'm really sorry that you're having any problems. Bring it back and I'll get to the bottom of it. And he brought it back. And he said that when he had that problem right after the bit you see in the video, that he unplugged the internal speaker and plugged in an external speaker, and the problem went away, which seemed odd to me. And so I picked the amp up, and I first thought, well, maybe there's a fault in the speaker, or the vibration of the speaker is causing something to act up. And the internal cab was causing that, and the external cab was no longer vibrating, whatever it was. So I was in the middle of a whole bunch of other amps that day. So as you might have heard previously, I set this up to play on a loop. I gave it about 2.5 hours of that looper at pretty reasonable gig levels, and I never made any weird sounds whatsoever. So now I'm going to go through with my chopstick, just like we did on that not Bandmaster, sorry, Pro Reverb, and see what we see. So I'm going to take it out of standby. And that noise that we heard in his video, and the way it kind of had a rhythm to it, made me a little bit suspicious of maybe the rectifier section, which is right here. So the first thing I want to do is manipulate all the power wires. And I was thinking maybe a bad rectifier diode, or which are actually the main rectifications in here. This is the low voltage rectifiers. Or a bad quick connect. These terminals have a lot of stress on a lead-free solder joint on the other side. But I'm not getting anything, and the amp is on. Got the volume here at 4, so if we hear anything, it should be nice and loud. So the next thing I'm going to do is manipulate these ribbon cables. This is the screen connection. Phase inverter stuff. Second gain stage stuff. First gain stage stuff. All right. Let's check stuff around the output jacks. Sometimes these solder joints aren't the best from the factory. And the heater stuff. The screen grid resistors I added. The primary connections. All right, 5-volt stuff. I'm sorry, 5-watt stuff. It's plus minus 16 volts. All the dropping resistors. Aha! That's a good sound. When I tapped on R75 here. And now it's fine again. Let me turn the... Was it R75 or something just coincidental in this area? All right, looks like we got a bad solder joint here at R75. And let me look up the schematic and just confirm. I'm pretty sure that's a dropping resistor. Let's see. All right, yeah, R75 is, as I suspected, a 10K dropping resistor, which gives the filter, separates the filter node that the preamp uses. So that's what's at fault. And I'm going to pull this board. And as I mentioned in last night's Sometimes They Come Back video, I do a 90 days, no questions asked thing. If I do service and something's still wrong with the amp or I miss something, I will either do it for free or at a very reduced charge. This one's that gray line in that it was not something related to what I did, I don't believe. And it wasn't part of the original problem that the amp was having. And so I would be justified in saying, well, that's not the fault you had before, and everything I did solve the faults the amp was exhibiting before. But I will also say that I am in the business of supporting Memphis musicians with their amps. And the guy spent about $300 getting his hot rod fixed and made hopefully bulletproof. And at the end of that, his hot rod was not bulletproof. So this is going to be a free service. And if you were wondering about the lack of zip ties here and here, I had removed them right before shooting this because I figured I was going to have to be going in, and zip ties are cheap and I have a bag of hundreds of them. So I'm going to skip ahead a bit, brother, and show you the board pulled, and we'll get to the issue at this area. Okay, these are the solder joints for that 10K resistor that made so much noise when it was tapped on. And these solder joints look absolutely fine. So I don't think it's a bad solder joint or something that I should have seen last time I was in here. I think what's happening is that resistor itself is bad internally. And that resistor probably went bad because of the leakage from the filter cap for that node, the old IC cap that we changed out previously. So I think this is just one more bit of the existing damage that bad filter cap did that I did not catch last time because it worked just fine. So I'm applying a little bit of fresh solder because the lead-free solder that they use does not want to flow. I'll just get here with a little bit of braid, and that'll take up the leaded and the lead-free solder. All right. Now let me get the resistor out. Move this ribbon cable a little bit. All right. This is the old resistor. And I don't see any heat damage in it, but it sure is acting ugly. And I'm gonna get that little bit of flux off the board real quick. Doop-a-doop-a-doo, where's my stuff? Aha, on the other side of the amp. I have got special chemicals for removing flux in spray form, and it's supposed to be magic. I found that isopropyl alcohol in a paper towel is faster and leaves less of a film than some of the other things out there on the market. Your mileage may vary. So I've got the old 1 watt and I got a new 2 watt, and I'm going to do a little crimp thing like the old one had, just to help it stand up off the board. They sell special crimpers for this. I don't have that tool. I should probably get one at some point. Just haven't gotten around to it. Let's see if I can do this from this angle. All right, so now I got it down to where the crimp is sitting on top of the other side. And now I want to give these a bend like this, which the previous ones did not have, just for a bit of additional mechanical support. And I'll snip off the excess, leaving just enough of that bend for there to be a little bit of strength. So just going to a higher quality 2 watt should be fine. I imagine if I were to put back a new version of the original resistor here with the F&T filter cap in place, it would also be fine. That should be good. Let me clean off that bit of flux that I just added. Not really necessary, but I like to do it whenever I can. All right, let me put this board back. Okay, put back together. I don't have all the nuts up top or the knobs back, but I've got the input jack, the master volume, and the volume and the presence nuts in place, and all the screws. So this should be secure. Let's take it out of standby. I've got the volume on like 3 or 4. I'm tapping the hell out of this. You know, you don't want to hit it with a hammer or anything. I think that probably got it. Now, let me look at the schematic real quick. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to confirm something before I said something. I don't like getting my facts wrong. I often misspeak in one of these things. I'll say 5 volts when I mean 5 watts or something, or I'll say EL34 when I obviously mean EL84. But I try not to give out incorrect information. I have made mistakes, certainly. But there's a lot of mythology about the hot rod, DeVille, and Deluxe, and the volume pot. A lot of forums say it's got a linear taper pot, you need to replace it with an audio taper. No, it's the Deluxe and DeVille, the hot rods, have always had audio taper pots. It's a 250K audio taper pot. The earlier amps had a 270K resistor in series ahead of it. The later ones have a 220K resistor ahead of it. That's a gain limiter because there's a lot of gain. There's an additional stage that other Fenders don't have. So that's just setting a max. But the crucial difference is R44, which on this revision is right here. And R44 is in parallel with the volume pot from a wiper to ground. And on the earlier amps, it's 180K. On the version 3, it's a 56K. And on this version 4, it's back up to 100K. And the smaller that resistor, so 56K being smaller than 100, being smaller than 180, the lower the volume and the lower ranges of the volume pot. So that's why certain versions seem to have a different taper. That pot needs a little bit of cleaning. I'll do that in a moment. It does two things. Number one, it changes the taper of the pot, which makes it more of an audio taper pot, is what people would perceive it as. So that, say, 2 on the volume is quieter on the version 3 than on the version 1. And 2 on the version 4 is a little bit louder than version 3, but still quieter than version 1 or 2. That's one thing. It reduces the maximum volume. The other thing is when it's on 10, you've got a 250K pot in parallel with a 180K or a 100K or a 56K. Especially with the version 3, the 56K, you're going to end up with a total resistance there in parallel of like 47K, which is going to mean that as you, I'm not going to do all the math, but as you turn the volume up on those channels, the bass will decrease a little bit. With the previous version with 180K, the bass will decrease less. With the 56K, the bass will decrease more. With this 100K, it's right in the middle. So no, you don't need to go replace the audio taper pot, the linear taper pot with an audio taper pot. It already has an audio taper pot. R44 is the one to be tweaked. So if you've got an earlier version and it's 180K, and you can look at the color bands and measure that, you can put another resistor in parallel with it. If you have this 100K on the 4 and you wanted to reduce that, you could put a 150K across that, end up about 56K. I'm not doing the math for this video. You know, you can reduce that or talk to your tech and say, what are you trying to accomplish? Just know that the lower you make this, the less low end you will eventually have as you do turn the volume up, which can be a good thing. There's nothing wrong with this design. Let me check the schematic on the Blues version of this amp, the Blues Deluxe and the Blues DeVille. I want to make sure that they're doing the same thing. Okay, as I thought I remembered, but I want to make sure before I tell you gospel, the Blues also has a 250K audio taper pot, but the way the volume works in that circuit is totally different and doesn't really apply. But the Blues also has a 250K audio taper pot, and if you wanted to change its taper, you could do the same thing. You'd have to have a tech put a resistor from wiper to ground on that volume pot, and that would only affect the sound in the clean channel on the Blues DeVille Blues Deluxe. But that's a thing. There's no linear taper pot there. It gets loud really fast because the overall circuit has more gain than a comparable vintage Fender, especially if you think of this as, because it's cosmetically like originally, you know, the Tweed. May be cosmetically similar to a Tweed or brown panel Fender. Inside, the circuit is very different, and it has an additional gain stage, which they kind of neuter in a very odd way later. And I have a lot of extensive mods for this that few people choose to do because you're spending a lot of money on a hot rod. But I mean, the circuit can be improved, but generally just getting the filters and the low voltage stuff sorted out so it won't burn the board. In this case, this 10K dropping resistor was damaged by the old leaking 22 microfarad. Once you do that, pop a 12A Y7 here, keep a 12AX7 here, put a 12AT7 here. You'll get even better response of the volume. Both channels will sound better. The amp will be quieter, and I think, you know, it's a great mod to do. There's a video I have already up. I'll find it and put it a link in the description and up top here as well. And it just means that where you used to have the volume on 3, you may now have the volume on 5 to get the same thing. But that means that you have the range that was between 1 and 3 on the volume pot is now between 1 and 5, and it's much easier to get a sweet spot, and you really don't lose any usable output level from the things because they're so loud in stock form. A lot of guys never turn them up over too, and that is why. Real fast, the other mod you can do for these is you can have a tech, I'm sure you can buy them on Reverb and eBay already. It's just a small metal box. Everyone uses for pedals. I've got this one here, just like that, with an input jack and output jack and a 100K audio taper pod in it. And you stick in the effects loop. And there's a global master volume that you've added to this, because the effects loop on this is actually a quite nice low impedance buffered effects loop. You just stick a low value pot like in there, just run into it, and just a volume pot. It's like a volume pedal. You could even use, if you have an Ernie Ball 25K volume pedal, you could just run it in the loop, though that's a lot of excess cabling. Better just to get a little $15 box with a $2 pot and a $1 knob and spend $5 on jacks and stick it right here in the loop. I think I should add that in future repairs on these, particularly when I've had to replace filter caps due to leakage issues, I'm going to replace all the dropping resistors at the same time, just so I don't have amps come back for things like this again. Resistors are inexpensive. These really high quality 2 watts are about 34 cents each. So, when you work on amps, you develop bills of material. I've got my hot rod, I've got my Blues DeVille, I've got my Deluxe Reverb reissue bills of material saved with various vendors. And so I will just add some dropping resistors to the saved bill of materials project manager stuff for these things. So next time one comes in, that'll just be added to the list. Just like on some of the larger models where the series filter caps are put in place, I'll change out the balance resistors, because those often fail in those, just because Fender used really cheap stuff. Anyway, I think this amp should truly be approaching bulletproof now. It's a PCB, it's single-sided. You can't make it truly bulletproof, but it should last a hell of a lot longer than it would in stock form. I would expect that this amp won't need major service other than maybe tubes for maybe 15 years if it's taken care of and not abused.